My name is Claire Preston, and this is the story I will never forget for the rest of my life. It was my brother's wedding day, a wedding I personally paid over $30,000 for, covering everything from start to finish: the luxury venue, the cake, the flowers, the catering, even the cheapest chair covers. Every single contract was under my name. I didn't ask for thanks, and I didn't need recognition. All I wanted was to quietly sit in the back and watch my only brother step into marriage. But the moment I arrived, dressed modestly, holding a small gift, the bride, the very woman I had supported with everything, looked me dead in the eye and said coldly, "You don't belong here." She said it right there, in front of my mother and the guests. And my brother? He stayed silent. No defense, no protest. They thought I'd cry, maybe storm out humiliated. But instead, I calmly walked back to my car, pulled out my phone, and within 10 minutes, their dream wedding turned into a nightmare. And believe me, watching the guests walk into an empty hall wasn't even the best part of this story. Before I reveal the full truth that left everyone stunned, hit like, drop a comment telling me what you would do if this happened to you, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell, because what happens next, you absolutely don't want to miss. A forgotten childhood, when my brother was the golden boy and I was just a shadow. Before I tell you why I dared to cancel my own brother's wedding, a wedding I paid for in full, I need to take you back in time to my childhood, to where it all began. From the time I was little, I learned one brutal truth. In my family, there were two kinds of children. The first was the one who got spoiled, forgiven, excused for every mistake. The second was the one who carried all the responsibility, who was told to be the bigger person and act older. And me, I was the second kind. My younger brother, Daniel, was always the center of attention. He was the golden boy. I was the responsible daughter. It sounds nice, but really, it was just a label to justify giving Daniel everything while I stood on the sidelines, quietly enduring. I'll never forget one birthday. I had just turned 9. Daniel was 4. Someone gave me a doll I had dreamed of for months. Minutes later, Daniel grabbed it, broke its arm. I cried, but my mother only sighed and said, "Claire, you're older. You have to let him have it. He's just a child." I went silent. I swallowed my tears. That day, I learned. I wasn't allowed to be angry. I wasn't allowed to fight back. My role was to be the good sister, the one who always gave way. Daniel grew up spoiled. He could forget to feed the dog, get detention, refuse to do homework. Yet there was always an excuse. My father was quiet, but my mother would just laugh. "He's still a boy. Let him be free a little." Then she turned to me, stern. "You're the older one, Claire. You should know better." That sentence haunted my entire childhood. "You're the older one. You should know better." It became the invisible sentence I lived under. In high school, the gap widened. I studied hard, graduated with honors, made it into the honor society. But my family barely noticed. On graduation day, I looked around the auditorium in my cap and gown while friends were showered with hugs, flowers, balloons, and my seat was empty. My father said he had to work. My mother said she had a cold. Daniel had baseball practice. I stood there clutching my diploma, forcing a smile while my chest ached. I told myself, "It's fine, Claire. You don't need anyone. Just be good and you'll be okay." But the truth? I needed it. I needed a hug, a proud glance, a simple "well done," and I never got it. Meanwhile, Daniel could fail classes, scrape by on the bare minimum, and the family would celebrate as if he'd won a Nobel Prize. He scored one goal in a little league game, and my mother cried, "He's amazing. Your brother is such a star, Claire." And me? I smiled quietly, then turned away. When I became an adult, I built my life from nothing. I worked 2 jobs, paid my own rent, started my own accounting firm. Every dollar I earned was sweat and sacrifice. Daniel, he dropped out of college to find himself, stumbled through jobs, crashed his car, racked up debt. And when that happened, my parents handed him $5,000 without hesitation. I never saw a penny. No one ever asked me, Claire, are you struggling? Do you need help? Because to them, I was the one they didn't need to worry about. One day, I asked my mother straight out, why is Daniel always the favorite? She replied calmly, almost dismissively, because you're strong. You don't need us. He's weaker. He needs more. Do you see the cruelty in that? The strength I forced myself to have just to survive became the excuse they used to abandon me. I lived my whole life that way, swallowing bitterness, telling myself if I gave more, if I kept showing up, someday they'd see me. Someday they'd be proud, but that day never came. Even in love, the wound followed me. I dated a man for 4 years. He treated me like an afterthought, only remembering me when he needed stability. When it ended, his words cut me deeper than he realized. You're great, Claire, but you're not exciting enough. That's when I understood. My whole life, I had been the caretaker, the shadow, the one no one chose but everyone relied on. I remember sitting alone one night in my kitchen, a bottle of wine beside me, whispering to myself, when did I become invisible? I didn't know the answer, but I knew this. In my family, Daniel had always been the light, and I was just the shadow. The cruelest part? I accepted it. I made myself into the older sister who endures. I thought my silence kept the peace. I thought giving more would earn love. But the truth is, the more I gave, the less I mattered. And then came the wedding, the one moment that brought every scar, every injustice crashing back. My kindness was exploited, my sacrifice trampled on. And when the bride, Madison, looked me dead in the eye and said, you don't belong here, in front of my mother, in front of the guests. That was the last straw. The glass overflowed. The years of silence ended. Do you want to know what I did next? How I turned their dream wedding into the worst nightmare of their lives. Generous but dismissed, when kindness turns into a knife against you. I still remember the day Daniel called me, his voice bubbling with excitement like a little boy. She said yes, Claire. Madison said yes. I froze for a second, then smiled even though no one could see me. Congratulations, Daniel. I'm truly happy for you. In that moment, a thought flickered in my mind. Maybe, just maybe, this would be my chance to finally step into the circle I'd been pushed out of my entire life. So when Daniel hesitantly brought up how expensive the wedding would be, the words slipped out of my mouth before I even realized. Let me take care of it. Think of it as my wedding gift to you. The line went quiet for a few seconds. Then I heard Daniel's voice break. Claire, are you serious? Yes, I'll cover everything. The venue, catering, the cake, the flowers, the photographer. You don't need to worry about a thing. That day, I felt, for the first time, like Daniel truly saw me as important. He said words I had almost given up on hearing. I don't know what to say except, I love you, Claire. Those words were so rare that I nearly cried. I believed, finally, that the love I'd been giving all along was being returned. At first, it seemed like everything I'd hoped for was coming true. Madison teared up, hugged me, and whispered, you're so generous. I don't even know how to thank you. She even asked me to be her maid of honor. In that moment, I thought the icy wall between us had finally cracked. I thought I had found my place in Daniel's big day. I threw myself into planning with all the excitement in the world. I built spreadsheets for the budget, made calls to venues, emailed photographers. I searched endlessly for the perfect flowers, elegant but understated. I even stayed up all night creating a mood board for the color scheme, lilac and sage green, soft, graceful tones Madison once said she loved. But you know what happened? Slowly, I realized I was just the checkbook. One time, I sent Madison centerpiece ideas with sample photos. I waited all day for her response. Finally, all I got was a single thumbs up emoji. No comment, no enthusiasm. A week later, I discovered she had chosen a completely different design without even telling me. I texted Daniel, "Hey, remember the table flowers I sent to Madison? What did you think?" He replied hours later, short and casual. "Oh, Madison switched it. Sorry, sis, the decision happened fast." I stared at the screen, my hand trembling. One bitter question echoed in my mind. Why does no one value what I do? The coldness kept repeating. I suggested a wedding album style. Ignored. I paid for a trial makeup session for Madison and the bridesmaids. She quietly went with someone else. Once I stopped by their apartment with fabric samples for the bridesmaids' dresses. Daniel opened the door, hesitating like he didn't want me there. Inside, Madison was laughing on a video call with friends. The second she saw me, her smile vanished, replaced by a fake tone. "Claire, why didn't you tell us you were coming?" I didn't think I needed to. I just brought some fabric samples. Daniel forced a weak smile. Yeah, sit for a bit." But the tension was suffocating. I only stayed 10 minutes before leaving. The breaking point came one evening. I was cleaning up my kitchen when I scrolled through Instagram. Madison had just posted a photo with another woman holding champagne flutes under fairy lights. The caption read, "My maid of honor. Couldn't imagine this day without you." I froze. Maid of honor? That was supposed to be me. No call, no text, no conversation. I had been replaced publicly, as if I had never existed. I called Daniel, my voice shaking. "Did you see Madison's post? Were you going to tell me?" There was a pause. Then Daniel sighed. "Don't make this a big deal, Claire. Madison just wanted someone closer, like a best friend. You're still invited." I let out a bitter laugh. A seat in the audience after I paid for everything? Silence. I dropped my head onto the table, tears soaking my shirt. For the first time in years, I didn't just feel dismissed. I felt erased. I went to my mother, hoping for a shred of support, but she snapped, "Claire, don't blow this out of proportion. A wedding is about the bride and groom. You paid for it, fine. That's your gift. Stop bringing it up and don't ruin their day." I stood there stunned. To my mother, my humiliation wasn't worth a fraction of Daniel's big day. And you know what stung the most? I had believed that generosity, giving everything I had, would finally earn me acceptance. But in reality, my kindness only made them see me as a walking wallet. I had poured in my money, my effort, my heart, and in the end, I was shoved aside, replaced by one of Madison's friends, whose name I didn't even know. This time, I wasn't just sad, I was furious. I felt every ounce of anger I had buried for years, from being the forgotten child, the responsible sister, the one always told to know better. It all came rushing back, and I realized if I stayed silent again, they would take it as permission. I would forever be nothing more than the one who pays, the one erased from the very things I built. And this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. The shock when the hidden betrayer turned out to be my future sister-in-law. I was used to being dismissed. I was used to being pushed to the margins, even in my own family. But the news I was about to hear, it wasn't just a scratch. It was a knife twisting into the deepest wound I carried. It was a quiet afternoon. I had just finished a long day of work and was sitting in my kitchen with a steaming cup of coffee. My phone rang. The caller was Vanessa, my best friend from college, the one who stood by me through my worst breakup. We hadn't spoken much lately, but the tremor in her voice told me this was serious. "Claire, Do you have a minute? Vanessa asked, her voice shaking slightly. Yeah, what's going on? I replied, trying to stay calm. She hesitated, then sighed heavily. I just saw some of your brother's wedding photos online, and suddenly everything clicked. Claire, I think. Madison is the girl Eric left you for. I froze. My ears rang. Eric, the man I loved for nearly 3 years. The man who promised me a future, only to one day look me in the eye and say coldly, I don't love you anymore. I had blamed myself, torn myself apart, convinced I wasn't exciting enough. But the truth was far crueler. He had betrayed me, with Madison. Are you sure? I stammered, my heart pounding. Almost certain. I remember running into him at a bar right after your breakup. He was with a woman. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But when I saw Daniel's wedding photos, Claire, it was her face. I set my coffee down, my hands trembling so badly I nearly spilled it. Memories flooded back. Eric changing his passwords, staying out late, dodging questions about strange messages. I remembered once his phone lit up with a name, M. I asked about it, and he told me it was a coworker. I believed him, but M had been Madison all along. I shot up from my chair, pacing the cramped kitchen. Each step felt like I was carrying a stone. Suddenly, all the pieces fell into place. The polite coldness, the fake smiles, the way Madison's eyes always avoided mine. She had never wanted me in her life. From the very first handshake, she had known exactly who I was. She knew she had been the other woman in the relationship that broke me. But instead of avoiding me, she had waltzed right into my family, put on a white dress, and let me pay for her fairy tale. Rage rose in my throat like it would choke me. I grabbed my phone and texted Daniel. Did you know Madison was with Eric, my ex, before you? The message marked seen, but no reply. A minute passed, 5, an hour, nothing. His silence tore me apart worse than any words could. That night, I drove to my mother's house. I needed the truth. I needed comfort. But when I told her, she only sighed. Claire, don't stir things up. The wedding is coming soon. Saying things like this will only hurt Daniel more. Mom, she destroyed me once, and now she's stealing my place in this wedding too, I cried, tears streaming down my face. But my mother shook her head, her eyes cold. You're too sensitive. You always think the world is against you. Grow up, Claire. Learn to let things go. I stood there, stunned. Grow up? Let it go? Those were the words I'd been hearing my entire life. From the time I gave up a birthday doll to my little brother, to now, when my future sister-in-law was stabbing me in the back. That night, I didn't sleep. I replayed every memory of Madison, the firm handshake, the stiff smiles, the hollow thank yous. And I realized she had been planning this from the start. She never intended to give me a place at the wedding. She only needed my wallet. The humiliation was unbearable, but buried in that pain was something else, something powerful. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just sad or wounded. I was furious. I felt a fire burn in me, a fire I had spent years smothering just to keep the peace in my family. The decision when silence became the verdict for an entire wedding. The text from Madison arrived on a gray morning. My screen lit up with words wrapped in fake sweetness. Claire, after discussing it, we've decided to keep the wedding small and intimate, just for those truly close to us. We really appreciate your help and hope you understand. I sat frozen, reading the message again and again. Those truly close to us? And me, the one who spent over $30,000, signed every contract, handled every detail, wasn't considered close? Madison had erased me with a few smooth sentences, as if I were some stranger who had stumbled into their lives. I typed back just 5 words. I'll play my part. To Madison, that reply might have sounded like relief, but she had no idea. The part I chose this time was not to be the silent wallet in the background. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the table. In front of me lay a thick folder, every wedding contract, from the venue and catering to the band and bouquets, and every single one bore the same name, Claire Preston. Slowly, I flipped through the pages, my fingers brushing over my own signature. Each one was a mark of trust, a belief that I finally had a place in my family. But now those signatures weren't sacrifices anymore. They were power. Another buzz, a second message from Madison. Just to be clear, nothing personal. We just want things simple and drama-free. Thank you for understanding. I let out a bitter laugh. Nothing personal? Drama-free? Cutting out your future sister-in-law by text after draining her money? That's nothing personal? I set the phone down, took a deep breath, and opened my laptop. My vendor contact list glowed on the screen. I wouldn't need to scream. I wouldn't need to beg. With just a few calls and emails, their dream would crumble. The first call was to the venue, a grand estate outside the city. The receptionist's voice was cheerful. "Good morning, Willow Heights Event Center. How can I help you?" I answered, calm as ice. "Hello, this is Claire Preston, the contract holder for the Mitchell wedding on the 17th. I'd like to cancel the reservation." Silence. Then, "Oh, are you sure? The deposit is non-refundable." "I'm sure. Please send me a confirmation email. No one else is authorized to make changes to this contract but me." I hung up. My chest felt hollow, but lighter than it had in years. One by one, the calls continued, like steady beats of a drum. The caterer. "You're the sole contract holder, so yes, we'll cancel and send a receipt." The florist. "Cancel everything? Understood. We'll update immediately." The photographer. "That's unexpected, but the contract is yours. I'll make a note." I felt no tremor in my hands, no rage, no shouting, just absolute calm, like a surgeon cutting out a tumor without hesitation. By the time I hung up on the last call, the three-tier wedding cake, I leaned back in my chair. In front of me, a page of notes covered in red X's. Done. In just a few hours, their biggest day was erased. My phone buzzed again. Not Madison this time. My mother. Her voice was frantic, nearly screaming. "Claire, what have you done? Daniel just went to the venue and they told him everything's canceled. Are you insane?" I gazed out the window, my voice steady. "Ask Madison. She wanted me out of the wedding, so I simply played my part." "This is your brother's wedding. You've ruined the whole family," she shrieked. I let out a cold laugh, replying slowly, "No, Mom, I didn't ruin the family. They did, when they chose to cut me out." Silence. In the background, I could hear Daniel shouting, "Mom, tell her to call me back right now." But I hung up. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel triumphant. Just silence, like the eerie calm after a storm, when everything is broken. But also, clearer than ever, all my life I had kept the peace. I had sacrificed. But not this time. This time, I had torn down the fake throne Madison built. And if Daniel chose to follow her blindly, then he would fall with her. The next morning, I woke, brewed a cup of coffee, and opened the window to the sun. My phone buzzed endlessly, calls and messages from Daniel, Madison, my mother. I ignored them. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the rare taste of peace. I knew that on their wedding day, when guests arrived in their finest clothes, expecting a grand celebration, and instead found an empty hall, the truth would explode. I wouldn't need to speak a single word. My silence would be the loudest slap of all. That afternoon, an email arrived from the event company. "Contract cancellation confirmed. All services terminated." I smiled. It was official, and in my mind, one thought rang clear. You wanted me erased from your story? Fine, let's see you tell it without me. And then the fateful wedding day arrived. Guests began to pour in, dressed to the nines, buzzing with excitement. They expected luxury, music, flowers, champagne. But behind the grand gates, all they found was emptiness. Do you want to know what happened when my family finally faced that truth? The dream wedding that turned into a lifetime of shame. That morning, Daniel and Madison woke up brimming with excitement. They believed everything was ready. The grand ceremony at Willow Heights, the lavish reception, the sparkling photos, the romantic music. Madison stared at herself in the mirror, lips painted red, her white dress pristine. She whispered, "Today, I'll be a princess." Daniel forced a smile, uneasy about my unanswered messages from the past few days. But he told himself, "Claire's just sulking. It'll be fine." They had no idea that when they arrived at the venue, what awaited them wasn't a fairy tale, but emptiness. When their car pulled up to the gates of Willow Heights, both froze. The iron gates were locked. Inside, not a single trace of preparation. No flowers, no chairs, no music. Just an empty lawn and the wind whistling through the trees. Daniel scrambled out, calling for the venue manager. A man in uniform appeared, his expression apologetic. "I'm sorry, sir, but the contract was canceled last week. The contract holder, Ms. Claire Preston, called us directly. All services have been terminated." Madison's face drained of color. Her hands trembled. "No, no, that's impossible. There must be some mistake. We spent months planning this. We paid deposits." The manager shook his head. "I'm sorry. Only Ms. Preston had the authority to cancel. Everything was done legally." Daniel felt his knees weaken, like his spine had vanished. He stammered, "Oh, God, Claire, what have you done?" Guests began to arrive, dressed in glittering gowns and tailored suits, gifts in hand, laughter in their voices. But the moment they saw the empty grounds, their smiles froze. A woman whispered, "Did we come to the wrong place?" An uncle frowned at his invitation. "No, it says Willow Heights, so what's happening here?" Confusion rippled through the crowd. Whispers grew louder, turning into waves of doubt. Madison's face flushed red beneath her makeup, sweat mixing with foundation. She dialed every vendor, florist, caterer, DJ, but every answer was the same. "We're sorry, but the cancellation came directly from the contract holder, Ms. Claire Preston." Every time my name was mentioned, Madison's face contorted further, a mixture of rage and terror. Finally, she screamed, nearly hysterical. "That woman, she canceled everything." With no options left, Daniel and Madison made a desperate decision. Move the wedding to City Hall. They addressed the crowd, trying to sound calm. "There's been a small issue. Please follow us. The ceremony will continue." But the guests' eyes no longer shone with excitement, only irritation, fatigue, and disdain. City Hall, a place meant for dry paperwork, now hosted a parade of overdressed guests. No decorations, no planning. A cramped room with peeling white paint, metal folding chairs, and a cheap bouquet someone grabbed last minute from a convenience store. No music, no wedding cake, no professional photographer, just the echo of high heels on the cold floor and bitter whispers. "We traveled all this way. For this? All that money? All that buildup? For this mess?" Madison sat stiffly, her mascara smudged with sweat and tears. Daniel bowed his head, his hands trembling. The ceremony began. A judge in a black robe read the vows in a flat monotone. No bridal march, no choir, just dry words echoing in a hollow room. And then, the unexpected happened. A woman in her 70s suddenly rose to her feet. Aunt Beverly, known throughout the family for her blunt honesty, leaning on her cane, her voice rang out, cutting through the silence. "Wait a minute. Are we really going to sit here and pretend this isn't a disaster? Pretend this isn't humiliating? All eyes turned. Madison froze. Daniel's face went pale. The judge stammered, "Ma'am, what do you mean?" Beverly stepped forward, cane tapping against the floor, her eyes blazing. "What did you do to Claire? She paid for every detail: flowers, cake, venue, music. She made this day possible. And you threw her out. No explanation, no gratitude, just betrayal. This is disgraceful." Gasps filled the room. Some guests nodded. Others looked at each other, ashamed. Madison tried to speak, her voice shaky. We, we didn't mean. Beverly cut her off, fire in her voice. Didn't mean it? Publicly replacing her as maid of honor wasn't intentional? Throwing her out with a cheap text message wasn't intentional? Don't insult our intelligence. Daniel's head hung low, his face burning red. Madison's lips quivered, but no words came. The room fell into suffocating silence. Guests whispered, "That's unforgivable. Claire is the one who deserves honor, not them." I sat quietly in the back, watching. I didn't need to say a word. The truth spoke itself, through Beverly's voice and through the contempt in every pair of eyes in that room. For the first time in his life, Daniel wasn't the golden boy. He was just a groom standing in shame under the weight of collective disappointment. The ceremony limped to its end. No applause, no cheers. The judge simply signed the papers and left. Daniel and Madison posed awkwardly for a few blurry phone photos, their smiles twisted, lifeless. Outside, rain began to fall. Umbrellas opened, hiding the cold faces of guests who walked away silently. No one bothered to say congratulations. The dream wedding ended as nothing more than a bitter farce. Claire becomes the center of social media when justice came from silence. I never imagined I'd one day become the center of social media. I've always been private, quiet, someone who never cared to air personal struggles online. But life has its cruel ironies. The pain I had hidden in silence for years suddenly became visible to the entire world through a shaky 2-minute video. The video was filmed by one of my younger cousins on their phone. The footage was unsteady, the angle imperfect. But Aunt Beverly's voice cut through unmistakable. "You kicked out the very woman who paid for this entire wedding. Claire is standing right there, and this is how you treat your sister? Shame on you!" Her words echoed through that room, and then across the internet. At first, the clip was posted quietly to TikTok among friends, but it spread like wildfire. Views climbed from hundreds to thousands, then to hundreds of thousands. By the next morning, I received a message from a coworker. "Claire, you're going viral. TikTok and Twitter are all over your brother's wedding." I opened my phone. It was true. The video had passed 2 million views in less than 48 hours. Hashtags like #weddingfail, #justice4Claire, City Hall drama were everywhere. The comments were relentless. I'd cancel too. No one should get away with disrespecting kindness like that. They uninvited the person who paid for it all. Karma works fast. Madison may have gotten married at City Hall, but in the court of public opinion, she's already guilty. While I stayed silent, Madison scrambled. Her carefully curated Instagram, once filled with polished photos, became a battlefield. Thousands of comments poured in beneath every post. "You humiliated your own sister-in-law." "Your fairy tale wedding was just Claire's money dressed up." She deleted comments. Then she shut them off. Then she locked her account. But it was too late. Screenshots had spread everywhere. A few brands she had hoped to collaborate with quietly pulled away. Daniel didn't fare much better. He wasn't very active online, but his coworkers knew. A meme of him hanging his head at City Hall was pinned to the company breakroom board. One colleague joked, "Hey Dan, if I buy you coffee, don't cancel on me, okay?" I don't want to get uninvited like your sister. The room erupted in laughter. Daniel flushed red, said nothing, and walked out. Soon after, he began calling in sick, avoiding the office altogether. I watched from a distance. I didn't post a single word. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. The world had already chosen sides. Some comments left me in tears. Claire is every person who's been taken advantage of. But this time, she taught the world a lesson. I see myself in her, silent for years, until one day she finally stood up. I realized this wasn't just about a failed wedding. My story had become a mirror for countless others, people ignored by their families, exploited, erased. One night, my father, the man who rarely spoke, whose silence had shaped much of my childhood, called me. His voice was slow, heavy with regret. Claire, I saw the video. I never realized it was like this. I'm sorry for leaving you to bear it all alone. I sat there, tears rolling down my face. My whole life I had waited for those words, and they came, not from my mother, not from Daniel, but from my father, the one I thought had never noticed. Another email came from Uncle Richard, my father's brother. Claire, if you ever want to throw a party of your own, I'll be the first to contribute. This time, it'll be for you, and you deserve it. I smiled in the dark. For years, I had been the shadow in my family. But now, for the first time, my absence carried weight. Meanwhile, Madison spiraled. A well-known attorney on YouTube released a video analysis. Claire had every legal right to cancel. Every contract was in her name. Madison and Daniel have no legal ground. The internet rejoiced, calling it the coldest, most lawful revenge ever. A family therapist broke it down further. Claire is the classic responsible child, expected to sacrifice. Daniel is the golden child, coddled. Claire was ignored until she couldn't bear it anymore. This explosion was inevitable. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling. I never wanted to be an internet sensation, but the truth had grown beyond me. I wasn't just Claire Preston, the betrayed sister, anymore. I had become a symbol of silent justice, and yet, even in that silence, I felt unease. My family was fractured. Daniel, my little brother, the boy I had once protected, was now ridiculed by the world. I didn't regret what I had done, but I knew the storm was only beginning. Then, on a rainy afternoon, just as I thought things had calmed, there was a knock at my door. I opened it. Daniel stood there, soaked, eyes red, voice trembling. Claire, you were right about her. I need to tell you the truth. The truth he was about to confess would cut deeper than even the wedding disaster. A family shattered when the truth forced everyone to see clearly. After the wedding disaster, the atmosphere in my extended family shifted completely. For the first time in my life, I saw relatives openly take my side. One evening, I received a call from Aunt Jean, the aunt who had always stayed neutral, too afraid of conflict. Her voice was heavy, almost trembling. Claire, I watched the whole video. My entire life, I thought you were just the strong daughter, the one who never needed anyone. But now I realize you were the one carrying this family all along. I'm sorry for staying silent too long. I sat on my couch, phone pressed to my ear, eyes wet with tears. The words I had waited decades to hear. Finally, someone spoke them. Not long after, Uncle Richard sent me an email. If one day you want to throw a party just for yourself, I'll be the first one there. Not to repay you, but to show you that you've always deserved it. I read each word, feeling both bitter and warm. Bitter because it took the collapse of everything for them to finally see me. Warm because at last, I was acknowledged. Meanwhile, the family split into two camps. Some defended Daniel and Madison, excusing them with, "It was their wedding day. Claire went too far." But more and more couldn't look away from the truth. I had been silent my whole life, and this time I simply refused to be silent again. My mother, though, was different. She clung tightly to her old beliefs. She called me, her voice sharp, accusatory. Claire, you've torn this family apart. Why couldn't you just swallow it one more time? He's your brother. I answered calmly. Mom, I've swallowed it my entire life, but the more I endured, the more I was disrespected. I'm done living as a shadow. There was silence on the line. Then she said the words that cut like a blade. Maybe you were never really part of this family. I closed my eyes and exhaled. The words hurt, but they also freed me, because she had finally said out loud what I had always felt since childhood. And once the truth was exposed, I knew I no longer needed to prove anything. A week later, Daniel showed up at my door. It was pouring rain. He stood under the awning, hoodie soaked, knocking 3 times. When I opened the door, his eyes were red, his shoulders trembling. Claire, can I come in? I stayed silent for a moment, then stepped aside. He didn't sit right away. He lingered in the living room, like even my small apartment felt foreign to him. Finally, he sat, hands clasped, staring at the floor. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I folded my arms, my voice cold. Wrong about what, Daniel? He took a deep breath, his voice unsteady. Madison cheated on me. Even while we were engaged, she was still in contact with Ben, an old flame. I found messages on her iPad. They said they missed each other. Claire, I've been betrayed. I stared at him. Inside, I wasn't surprised. I had always known Madison was never honest. But hearing Daniel say it aloud left me torn between pity and bitterness. So who do you blame? You chose her? You let her disrespect me. You let her turn me into nothing but a wallet, and you stayed silent. Daniel covered his face, his voice breaking. I know I failed. I was a coward. I thought if I kept the peace, she'd be happy and I'd save the marriage. But instead, I hurt you, the only person who ever stood by me. For a moment, I didn't see a grown man. I saw the little boy who once begged me to chase away his nightmares. But that boy had grown into a man who betrayed me, to protect a woman who was never worth it. I sighed, speaking slowly. Daniel, I don't hate you, but I'm no longer the sister who will carry everything. I've lived like that too long, and it's been killing me piece by piece. From now on, I live for myself. Daniel looked up, eyes glistening with tears. Then, can you forgive me? I shook my head, my gaze steady. Forgiveness would mean going back to being the family's pillar, letting everyone lean on me, use me, erase me again. I won't. I'm not that Claire anymore. You need to take responsibility for your own life now. He sat frozen. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. After years of carrying, years of swallowing my pride, I had finally said what should have been said long ago. I would no longer be the sister who endures. Daniel rose slowly. He didn't beg. He just said softly, I understand. Thank you for telling me the truth. I'll go. The door clicked shut behind him. I sat still, then let out a long breath. Not because I felt lighter, but because I knew a long chapter of my life had closed. My family, the one I had once desperately wanted to belong to, was now fractured beyond repair. But strangely, I didn't feel broken, because for the first time, I wasn't the one sacrificing to hold it together. I had ended the role of the sister who endures, and that, more than any revenge, was the greatest victory of my life. The ending, when Claire stopped searching for a seat at the family table. Some mornings I wake up and realize I didn't cancel the wedding out of hatred. I didn't do it to take revenge on Daniel or Madison. I did it because, for the first time in my life, I stopped holding up people who never valued me. I used to believe that if I sacrificed enough, if I gave a little more, if I stayed silent long enough. One day my family would finally see me. But the truth is, they never needed me as a person. They only needed what I could provide. And when I stopped giving, I finally saw the truth. My worth was never in their eyes. Madison and Daniel split quickly, faster than it took them to plan their so-called fairy tale wedding. The news spread through the family like a cold wind. Some pitied Daniel, some blamed him for being blind. But I no longer cared. One evening, Aunt Jean called to tell me Madison had left, abandoning Daniel with debt and heartbreak. All I said was, "I understand, Auntie." I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know how Madison was living or how much Daniel was hurting. That was their choice, their price for selfishness. I no longer had a duty to heal anyone. My mother kept sending messages, begging me to return to the family dinner table. Her last one read, "Claire, let the past go. Come back for dinner with me and Daniel. Family is still family." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I put the phone down without replying, not out of anger, not to cut ties, but because, for the first time in my life, I understood. I didn't need a seat to be acknowledged. That table had always been a place where I sat in silence, swallowing pride, being overlooked. I once longed to belong to that we, but now I didn't need it. I had built my own table, one with only me and the peace I had never been allowed to have. I began living differently, not loud, not glamorous, but a life I chose. In the mornings, I brewed coffee and opened the windows to the sunlight. I listened to birds, to children laughing outside. Those sounds were more beautiful than any empty compliment I had once craved. I focused on my work, running my small firm, not to prove my worth, but simply because I enjoyed it. I cooked for myself, kept my apartment cozy, read books, took walks in the park. Sometimes I wrote down what I had lived through, not to complain, but to remember. I had survived a long life of wounds, and I was still standing. One day, Vanessa asked me, "Claire, do you ever regret canceling that wedding?" I smiled softly, answering slowly, "No, because it was the first time I didn't let others decide my place. I wasn't the shadow anymore. I stepped into the light, even if it was in silence." Vanessa squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. "I'm proud of you." And for the first time, I realized I was proud of myself too. I had spent years blaming myself, not fun enough, not pretty enough, not important enough to be loved. But now I knew I was never the problem. The problem was how they chose to see me. And I had let them define my worth for far too long. Not anymore. I no longer seek validation from a chair at the family table. I no longer beg for praise, for attention. I already have everything I need: a peaceful heart, a life that's enough, and the freedom to be myself. One autumn afternoon, I walked through the park. The golden sun spilled across the leaves. Children laughed as they chased each other. An old couple sat on a bench, holding hands with quiet tenderness. I stopped, breathed deeply, and understood. Happiness doesn't come from being recognized by others. Happiness comes when you stop trying to be someone for them and accept that who you are right now is already enough. My story ends here, but maybe yours is still being written. If you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own family, leave a comment below. Let me know I'm not alone and you aren't either. Don't forget to like if you resonate with my journey, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you won't miss the stories yet to come. Because together, by sharing our scars, we may find the strength we never thought we had. So tell me, if you were in my place, would you stay silent to keep the peace or stand up to protect yourself?